I'm Greg O'Hara, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Well, welcome to the program, Greg. What a pleasure to meet you and to talk about one of America's most recognizable names, of course, the black and yellow of Hertz, an American business icon for a kid from Canada. It's a pretty unique position to be in, right?
It is. It's both unique and humbling, and depending on which way you look at it and on what day.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about Hertz for a moment, but I also want to get into your history. You've said that you're an immigrant to the United States to some extent, and then privileged to be there. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, when you grow up in Canada, most of the people in Canada live within spitting distance of the U.S. border, and you get ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN piped into your home every day. And one of the things about that is you start learning all of these things about America. In many cases, I don't know if anyone else finds this, but some cases the kids in Canada learn more about American history and American geography than the people in the United States itself.
That's true.
It's such an important place to the rest of the world, and we are so proximal to it. So growing up, I don't think there's any place else I wanted to live. Getting an education in the United States was important to me. Living in the United States was important to me. And the reason I feel privileged is because, I stayed in Canada for until my late teens or early 20s, a little bit of back and forth, but mostly late teens. And the US has been really good to me. One of the things that I'll say is, in the United States, it doesn't matter who your father is or necessarily what school you went to or who your friends are. Everybody is judged on their own merits. Where Canada, and I love Canada as a country, but I've always said that Canada helps you to the middle. If you're down on your luck, they help you to the middle. But if you're an ambitious person, the system also helps you to the middle. And so
I don't think I've ever heard that stated that way. That is so true.
Yeah, and so I think being in the United States is possibly the best place to live in the whole wide world, and I feel privileged to live here, and I feel privileged to be. That's a whole different program about how the United States doesn't get treated fairly around the world for all the acts of kindness that they do. But I love it here.
Yes, interesting, fascinating story. You're not a car guy per se, but the car business helped you from the start. And when you were starting your own business and sold your first business to Ross Perot, none other than Ross Perot, yeah. you had a creation, the automated time systems.
Yes.
Punch clocks that self-tabulated, sold to Honda and to Chrysler. You were in the car business from the start.
That is a very generous characterization, Jason. No, I was kind of a geeky physicist that wanted to make money selling software. And today, well, that's a super popular job. In the early 90s, it wasn't at all clear that computers would take over the world like they have today. So we had a bit of an uphill battle with that company, convincing people that computers could even do what we say they would. You had to be a really good coder because you didn't have a lot of memory to work with and you didn't have a lot of computing power to work with. But I like cars. I've always liked cars. I would say that I'm not a car guy per se. I don't have dozens and dozens and dozens of them in the garage. I don't think I could repair one if my life depended on it, short of changing a tire. But I always liked cars and the statement they made for North American culture.
Tell me about your time with Ross Perot.
Oh, it was great. So after they bought the company, I went and worked in various different areas of the company. I traveled. It was the first time where I seriously got to travel the world. I went to India and all over Europe. It was a great time for me. Being a young man in his 20s and representing a name that was known the world over. I had we did, obviously Perot Systems had a lot of clients in the automotive industry. And so we worked a lot with the automotive clients, but, even visiting a car company that maybe some of your listeners aren't familiar with, but Mahindra
Of course, out of India.
in India, and seeing how cars got made there versus cars got made everywhere else was, eye popping. And so I had a great time there. And then I got a job at Sabre, and that's kind of what got me into the travel industry.
And in fact, just prior to that, one small airline deal out of Colorado Springs, an outsourcing deal for Western Pacific Airlines, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. That's what led to Sabre hiring me. It was, I think, a now defunct airline, but it was in Colorado Springs, and we did a outsourcing deal for them, and I led that deal.
You were fired from the job at Perot Systems the same day that you accepted the job at Sabre. So timing was everything for you, Greg.
You did good, G2. Yes. By the way, for your listeners, I actually got fired at Perot Systems and then got the job. It just happened to be in the same day. I got a call from a recruiter, and since I needed a job, I took the job at Perot Systems right away. So I wasn't really unemployed for more than 25 hours.
That's great. And then the world of travel opens up for you. And so this undergraduate physicist, as you said, a tech guy, starts to get into the travel business, which is ultimately going to lead us, I think, to the Hertz story here in a moment. But tell me a little bit about Carlson Wagonlit, Travel Leaders, American Express Global,
Sure.
and the interconnections of all those things.
Yeah. So what I'll just do a little bit of chronology quickly, and then if you
Sure.
want to revisit it, you can. So I went to work at Sabre, and that was a great place to learn about the travel business because it connected everything. It connected travel agents to airlines to cruise lines and all these different kinds of things. And then I didn't get fired from that job, but probably constructively fired from that job, I would say. And I left the company, and I moved back to Canada to work with some telecommunications company up there for a couple of years and try to figure out what I wanted to do. And I met some people from Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, which for those of you who don't know, is a really big investor.
One of the largest in the world.
It doesn't sound like it's very big, but it's a big place. And they gave me hundreds of millions of dollars to try to go find a company. And that company ended up being a competitor of Sabre called WorldSpan. And I did that deal in around 2002, 2003. I sold the company to Blackstone in 2006, and then went to work for JP Morgan Chase. And so at JP Morgan Chase, I was in the private equity division called One Equity Partners. I worked for another fantastic guy named Dick Cashin. Did not get fired from that job, by the way. Good for me. And I worked for Dick, and he was big on letting me invest in travel and travel services companies. So we bought Travel Leaders, we bought a piece of Travelport, we bought Carlson Wagonlit, we bought all kinds of different things. And then I became a balance sheet CIO at JP Morgan Chase in the special investments group, which allowed me to invest across a range of activities. When it became clear that that job was going to be kind of a long burning job, I decided to leave in 2012, and I had a couple of ideas. I wrote down on a little, as you do on a little pad of paper, what I wanted to do. And so I bought an asset back from Dick, this company called Travel Leaders, now known as Internova. And I went down and saw Ken Chenault and Steve Squeary at American Express and convinced them to partner the travel business with me in about a $900 million investment. And then we bought a few other companies, and this was kind of like it's called a pledge fund. It's you have a few investors, and it was, I'm not allowed to say the name, which is silly, but you'll figure out what it is, a large endowment in the Northeast, university endowment in the Northeast. Also, I had BlackRock and I had QIA. And so they gave me enough money to kind of like a hunting license. But the problem with doing that is imagine going deer hunting or bear hunting and you walk into the woods without a gun. And when you find the deer, you have to say, stay right there until I go back to my truck and get
Right
my
back.
car. But yeah. So we put out $1.7 billion, which became worth a lot more than $1.7 billion. And in 2000, call it 18, so about 4 years after we closed Amex, we started to raise a fund. That became Certares Holdings, and we own dozens and dozens of things now. We have 3 different products. We have and this will tailor into your next question. We have a long only equities product. We have a real estate product. We have a venture capital product. And we have a distressed product partnered with some fantastic guys with Tom Wagner at the lead called Nighthead. And it was between Certares Holdings and Nighthead that we were really able to make an investment in Hertz.
So let's get to Hertz. Why Hertz? What's the origin of the story, and what was interesting to you about Hertz?
So this is going to sound really odd, but for a guy from the travel from the travel business, I've always wanted to own a rental car company. Always. Okay. They always seemed expensive to me. They always seemed hard to get, and the reason was twofold. One is for the average public, no one really cares what rental car company they rent from, right? So no one has ever said in my entire career, Avis, Hertz, Enterprise. It must be that company. I will not rent from someone else. Because if all 3 companies have a Chevy Impala, all 3 companies can rent you a Chevy Impala. And interestingly, all 3 companies can rent you that car in pretty much the same spot, right? Mm-hmm. So remember that I have investments in all kinds of distribution companies all over the place, right? And so whether it's Amex or TripAdvisor or anybody, all of these people influence who you rent a car from. So for instance, if you go on a website or you call your travel agent, you might care what airline you fly. You definitely care what destination you're going to, right? You might care on what airline you fly, because is it direct? Do you have to connect? Do I have a frequent flyer mileage program? You sometimes usually care about the hotel you stay in. Does it have a gym? Is it located well? But in anyone's history that's living to this, they've almost never said they wanted to rent from a particular place. So distribution has a opportunity to influence who you rent your car from, because they are like replicants. They're the same thing, right? So that was the first thing. So I could use my distribution knowledge and experience to really improve Hertz or whatever rental car sales. The second thing was just everybody out there in the travel business has an idea on how things should operate, right? When you take a flight, you oftentimes are talking to your friends afterwards about, hey, it should have worked this way. They should board the plane that way. Everybody is a jailhouse expert
That's true.
At travel.
Yes.
And I was no different. I was a jailhouse expert on rental car companies. And as technology evolved, for instance, I could never figure out, absent your credit card not being in your file or your driver's license expiring or something like that, why in the world anyone would ever have to stand in line at a rental car counter. I never understood it. So for instance, I'm going to get off the plane. They know what car they're going to rent to me. They could tell me what car they were going to rent. I could walk in, take my phone, walk up to the car, and use near field communication, right? To open the car, jump in and take off. I shouldn't have to talk to anybody if I don't want to, right? Like, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any Hertz employees or anything like that there, but I should be able to do that quickly. I'm a business traveler. You're probably a business traveler. Many people on the listening to us are probably business travelers. And that's what I want to do. Other people may want to have a long dialogue about which cars are available. I don't. I just want to jump in and go. And so one of the things that was interesting about this is, what other improvements could they make? If you've rented a car in Europe, right? It's interesting because before they rent you the car, they give you and the car effectively a proctology exam of walking around the car, what dings are on the car, because I think car rental companies in the past have made a lot of money by charging you for esoteric cracks or something's gone wrong, and so wouldn't it be great if you could just use telematics to do that? Did the car get in an accident? Where has the car been? Also, am I renting to you at $34 a day because you're going to drive nonstop between New York and Los Angeles, right? And basically drive, 3,000 or 4,000 miles across the country? Or am I renting to you on $34 a day because you're headed 6 miles from the airport, you're going to park it at the hotel, you then drive 2 miles to your business meeting and come back? Those are two really different renters, right? And the car companies don't know. They have no idea who's renting their cars. So telematics was important. And then the thing that I thought was interesting is, I don't know about anyone else on the phone, but I'm going to get this right, I promise you. I don't know how they decide the price of anything. It is absolutely unclear how the price of anything gets calculated. In an airline, there's it gets more expensive as the date approaches. If you're on a flight and you paid a lot relative to what you usually pay for the flight, it usually means the flight is packed, right? Also true.
You're buying at the last minute. Yeah, and correct. Any of those variables. Sure.
Yeah. In the car rental, I have no idea. And then the last one is, so I'm a skier, maybe some of you are skiers. I have to fly into Bozeman, Montana every year. And every year they run out of SUVs, like every year. So they know it's snowing. They know they're going to be there. So if you think about it, number one, they don't seem to be able to figure out how to get demand, right? Where the demand's going to be. They then can't apply the supply to that. And then the third thing they can't do is price it in a way that's intelligible to me, right? I get that in the middle of mud season in May, Bozeman, Montana, four-wheel drive should be cheap, if they should be there at all. Maybe they should be in another location, or maybe even July, they're more expensive. Christmas, they're going to be more expensive. I get that. But the average person, I find, is a better consumer when they can figure out how things should work and how things should operate. And this was a little Byzantine.
So why has this been so difficult, Greg? Is it just the lack of connections between the technology systems, the lack of telematics, the fact that car rental companies have done things the same way for so long? What's the magic bullet? Why?
So I think a number of things. If you look at a car rental company, and you can take two very different positions on this, and if it's okay with you, I'm not going to take one today. Mm-hmm. The largest car rental companies are really giant hedge funds, commodity brokers, right? So if you look at the largest car rental companies, one could take the position that the car manufacturers need to manufacture a lot of cars. They sell them to fleet, right? They use them a little bit, and so they can sell them for lower or higher prices based on that use, because they can't give them to the dealers and have the dealers use them a little bit, right? So there's a big value arbitrage between, I buy a new car, and let's say as a fleet manager, I get a discount, right? And then I sell that car, I drive it a little bit, and I can maybe even sell it for more than I bought it for, right? That's kind of like the same guy who manages any commodities. And these are unusually large commodity funds, right? These are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 billion, believe it, $30 billion commodity funds, right? And you're basically buying and selling commodities, right? And many of the large car rental companies, not Hertz, but many of the large car rental companies, they earn a lot of money by buying and selling these things on a value arbitrage. Mm-hmm. The other thing that car rental companies do is rent them. And if you took a position that the largest car rental companies care more about being in the commodities business than in the rental business, you could understand why the rental experience isn't that great. All it really does is, I need some mechanism of putting miles on cars before I sell them.
It's a means to an end. That's all it is.
Yeah. And so the other thing is, if you and I, like, you're in the journalism business and the radio business and all kinds of media businesses, I'm in the investment business. if you look at, if you and I were both in the technology business and we were trying to figure out where to go work based on being experts in technology, the rental car business might not be top of their list, you know? So what ends up happening is you have, in order to take these old economy businesses like Amex GBT and Travel Leaders and, you know, our cruise businesses, we have to be really committed to using technology to get the best technologists, right? Because otherwise you become, you know, the IT guy who makes the laptops work or puts the security on, and people, really talented people, aren't interested in those jobs. And so I think based on what Hertz has announced it's going to do with, you know, telematics, yield management, fleet management, demand sensing, all of these things, and I hope we get to talk about this later on, and electrification, we're seeing a lot more people interested in coming to work as a technologist at a car rental company. And I think that's probably true of the other car rental companies too, to be fair to them. I think like Hertz isn't going to be the only company doing this. I think we're best positioned because we don't have a lot of interim technology standing in our way.
Right.
But I think you're going to find that more and more people are going, like, you know, if you were going to go work at what is Uber, right? Is that a car rental company? Is Lyft? They don't have a problem getting people to come work there that are great technologists. You know, Uber's a great company. Dara is one of the, I think, a great leader. Lyft is a good company. Didi's a good company. But those are effectively car rental companies with a different model. You know, you rent them very short term. They don't own assets. And so I think you're going to find that over time, we're able to be maybe not Uber, maybe not Lyft, but we're able to use that same technology activation to attract the kinds of people that they've been traditionally able to attract.
So when you looked at Hertz at a point where it was fairly distressed and going through the bankruptcy process, what was most appealing to you then?
Well, when I first looked at Hertz, I thought it was going to definitely liquidate. You know, I looked at it, and so here's the two things I didn't know when I first looked at Hertz. One was that Americans writ large wouldn't really be able to travel internationally, right? And they were going to take domestic vacations. If you've tried to rent a car, anybody on the phone, I apologize for the pricing, but that's to the demand, right? So what happened is demand went up more than 60% over 2019. And I also didn't know there was going to be a chip shortage, right? So supply went down by 50%. And if you remember your high school microeconomics course, when demand goes way up and supply goes way down, price goes way up the curve.
Only one reaction to that.
Correct. And so what happened is the company I thought was going to liquidate it first. I thought maybe I'd pick up the brand or something like that and I'd reconstitute it. But I don't know when exactly it became, hey, wait a minute, this is going to be a real thing. But the company just started earning more and more and more money, and the company started turning around, you know, mostly by exogenous events that weren't inside its control. The company did a really good job. Paul Stone and the management team did a really good job taking cost out, but absent a massive move in demand, as well as the chip shortage, those two things really helped the company out quite a bit. And I would say my guess is, you know, if not, Hertz will have an excellent year this year. You know, I think if you take a look at their second quarter earnings, trying to make sure I don't do anything wrong here on the call. If you take a look at their second quarter earnings, I don't recall a time that Hertz ever earned that much money in the second quarter.
Wow. And the confluence of events, I mean, the pandemic changing individual habits, the chip shortage, which has affected every piece of the auto industry, continues to affect the rental industry. And then let's look at pricing. I mean, just what's happened to pricing in the used car market in general. Nobody could have ever predicted that.
Never. It's Looney Tunes, the price. But you hear stories of Hawaii, the rental car prices are 600 a day. So people are renting U-Hauls and driving them around as a proxy for rental cars. But like anything else, it's supply versus demand, right? And these companies had a really rough time in 2020, and I would say net, they're probably still behind. And we'll get pricing right when things normalize. The chip shortage is going to end in 22 or 23, depending on who you believe. The car companies, the OEMs, are going to catch up in manufacturing. Hopefully, they're going to continue to sell to fleet. And if they do continue to sell to fleet, supply will come back in, demand will start to normalize, and prices will probably go back to about where they were before.
So let's talk about one item that you just brought up a moment ago, which is the transition to EVs. And over the next year or two, some say there will be at least 100 different models that are in the marketplace offered by automakers. How does Hertz position itself in an era of EVs, and then by extension, autonomous?
Yeah. So we're going to be as electric as we can. And I hope we'll be first, but we're going to be as electric as we can. The economics. So firstly, you and I can argue what the total life cycle of an EV looks like, right? Is it better than an ICE, or is it not better than ICE? We can have an intellectual debate about that. But over time, people will figure out how to dispose of the batteries and do all the rest of the things that cause angst. In general, as far as our ESG mandates go, I think everybody gives electrification or ESG in general a bad time because it's not perfect. Well, we're just trying to make it better, not perfect. We think it should be more friendly to the environment than it was last week or last year. So I think EV in general, electric vehicles are in general better. And so when you can do that and also provide yourself with superior economics, so they're better for car rental companies to run. They're just cheaper, right? In almost every respect. The last thing is our corporate clients also want them. They're willing to pay more for them. They want to be seen driving electric vehicles to their customers. And as you're well aware, Hertz has a big corporate business. So I think that's the first thing is we're going to try to be buying electric vehicles, as many as we can. In fact, I would tell you, Jason, if we wanted to buy as many as we could, we can't. They're not making enough. So I didn't know that statistic about 100 different kinds of vehicles. Great, just make them.
They're coming, right?
Yeah,
it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, so we'll probably be ready to roll them out before they're ready to sell them to us.
This is a huge priority for you. I mean, you really want to position yourself forward there.
Well, we sign a treaty as an investor that says we'll do our best for the environment. Our investors, we have a lot of university endowments. We have a lot of sovereign wealth funds who really care about that. And so do we. And again, not perfect. Like, listen, if I get on another podcast sometime with some environmentalists, I'm sure they could pick holes in what we're doing. But we're just trying to make it better. We'll get it perfect over time, but we're trying to make it better. And then I would say what's going to be interesting is the alchemy of the rollout, right? In general, when you introduce a new product, you might run it out to 10% of each one of your markets. So let's say EVs were introduced into the market and 10% of the cars in Austin would be EVs, 10% of the cars in San Antonio, 10% of the cars in Houston might be EVs. That's probably not the right way to do it, right? Because you want to center all the EVs in one spot. So you might get to 80% of the cars in Austin will be EVs, and then only the cars that you'd like to buy an EV, but you can't. Rivian is a great product. Tesla's a great product. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, they all have great products, right? But I may not be able to buy enough pickup trucks or SUVs that are also electric vehicles. So I may have to use ICEs for longer. But certainly things like the Tesla Model 3 and its proxy, there's a bunch of those out there. I should be able to get those. And so what I'd rather do is concentrate those city by city, because the other thing people don't think about is, how am I going to charge these, right? Like if you've ever lived in New York City or Detroit or any of these places, there's a big port authority that looks after the airport. I need permission to electrify the garages. Some of the car rental companies share garages, right? Where they have multiple car rental companies in the same garage. You kind of get on a little bus or a train, you go. So you need a lot of permission. So we're going to look for spots, right, that do that. Autonomous is super interesting. That's probably the most exciting part of being in the rental car business.
Tell me about that.
So if you look about everybody talking about robo taxis, Jason and Greg go home at night, and I'm an early to bed guy, so I'm in bed at 9:30. I flip on a switch, and my car goes out onto the street that I own and earns money while I'm sleeping, and comes back home the next day in time to take me to work. That's great. That's a great story. What's interesting is in an autonomous world, that car still has to get washed by somebody. That car still has to get charged. It may have to make it back into my garage at night. Maybe we can rig that up. But if there's a university student that leaves a stinky McDonald's wrapper in the back seat, who's going to clean that up, right? Who's going to repair the car if it gets a flat? So one of the things that a lot of the autonomous guys are missing is, who is the fleet management company? I know there's a big discussion over who should own them. Should Tesla own all of its cars and just have a giant robo-taxi fleet and be asset heavy? Or should they sell cars to Jason and Greg and just use them when Jason and Greg aren't using them, kind of like Airbnb does, right? That kind of thing. But all of the car manufacturers, at least that I've talked to, are very interested in having a rental car company do fleet management. I don't know if you've ever been to LA, right? Or anyone has, but Hertz is a 105-year-old company. It bought land in LA in the 50s, right? And it got it permitted to do rental cars all over the place. If you live in Beverly Hills, no one's authorizing a big autonomous car charging a lot in their neighborhood, so a bunch of empty cars can be running up and down the street. It's just
right.
It's not going to happen. So I would say I deal with the least sexy part of the autonomous car business. And I'm not at all saying it's super valuable by any stretch of the imagination. But so it's not sexy, not the most valuable part, but it's necessary, right, to have autonomous cars come out. And when we've talked to the autonomous car guys, for the most part, I'm not saying for all parts, they've all kind of scratched their heads that this is not something that's been part of their business plan. So at least we're dropping knowledge on people who are gonna change the world from an autonomous perspective.
Are fuel cells interesting for you?
Everything that fuel cells, EV, everything that happens. We haven't seen one that we think can be manufactured. Remember that we kind of have to take things that the general public is either used to, comfortable with, renting.
Ease of use, right?
Yeah. And so I think that's probably longer tail and not ready for prime time would be my guess. That'd be my best guess as to what happens. But when they're there, if they're more environmentally friendly, we're committed to doing it.
You're all in. Yeah. Greg, if data, you mentioned this earlier, if data is the new gold, and if you know all of the data, then effectively you can change the world. Do you need to start discussions with OEMs, not about getting more cars, but about using data in the future?
Yeah, I don't know that they have as much data as we have. So I think they're more interested in our data. So, we may know where people drive the rental cars. I suspect that over time, so will the OEMs. So that's the data that everybody's looking at. But we may know, for instance, when you're on the web searching, right, for where you're going to go, the OEM is not aware of where you're going to go. We are, right? When you buy an airline ticket, for the most part, the OEMs aren't aware. When you're getting a hotel, they're not aware. because of our partnership with Amex, right, we can be aware sometimes of payments. So for instance, in Europe, there's this thing called duty of care, right? And Amex cards and Amex travel partner with each other so we can tell companies where their employees are based on swipe data. So every time you swipe your card, we know, okay, Jason was here. Now he's here. Now he hopped in an Uber. Now he's paying at a restaurant here. So we can track the employees. By the way, that's not creepy. That's a law that the Europeans have so that if there's a terrorist event or something like that, we know where everybody is and we can get them out. And so I think we have a lot of data to help them with. And also it's unclear but for a few examples, like, Instagram, Facebook type people, that companies are big at hoarding the data and collecting the data. I don't know that they use it very, very well, right? And so we'll collect it all. We'll certainly partner with the OEMs on data. And I know they believe that the data of location data and where people are driving and what they're doing and how fast they're going and whatnot is very, very valuable. And I'm sure someone smarter than me can do something with it. But as to the rental car business, I think we're doing okay in terms of that. I think we can help the OEMs understand what people are using cars for when they rent them.
You said that you are not into the sexiest side of the automobile business, but you actually just a few weeks ago ventured into one of the sexier sides of the automobile business. Tell me about Singer.
Oh, no, now you're that's a softball for me. That's the sexiest.
It is the sexiest. And
yeah,
for those who don't know, please, Greg, tell them about Singer and why you wanted to be involved with Singer.
Yeah, so Singer may well make, and I say this not as an expert, I say this as a fan, before I bought the company, that Singer may well make the best car in the world, right? So when Tom and I started the business, the business, we were sitting, and this is a true story, no one believes it, but it's true. We sat down and said, when the business gets to a certain point, we should both kind of reward ourselves. In other words, demark the point that it was going to get. And usually that's a watch or a trip or, something like that. And without knowing it, we both wrote down that we wanted to buy a Singer. That was the thing that we wanted to do. And so Singer needed capital to expand. They've got a really long backlog, 4 or 5 year backlog. And there's a limit to how long anyone will wait for anything, whether it's a Hermes bag or a Patek Philippe watch or whatever it is. There's a limit to how long they'll wait. Sorry, you're going to say something.
And just explain exactly what you mean by buying a Singer, just for those who might not know.
So Singer is a 1980s, 1990s, and soon to be different kinds. So I don't want to ruin Maz and Rob's. They take an older car and they completely rebuild it with better, faster, amazing. The only way to describe it is they are watchmakers. Like, to go see these things get made, like even inside the car, a piece you will never see ever in your entire life is absolutely pristine or sandblasted in a way to make it beautiful. The same way when you look in the back of a watch, like a Patek or a Rolex or something like that, you see the jewels and the movements and whatnot when the glass, when it's black. So they were self-funded for the most part, and they wanted to go get a manufacturing facility. So for those of you who are in the US, we just expanded in a brand new facility in Los Angeles. We give them capital to do that. They'll be able to build the cars in America. A lot of people, I don't call it this, but a lot of people call it the American Ferrari, and I can understand why. And they'll be able to go to get more output out of those cars and they'll be able to output more cars as a result of the new facility. So they make a classic, which is what I described. And then for more than $2 million, they make this thing called a DLS, which is kind of like a Porsche 911, but with all the weight stripped off of it, all carbon fiber,
gorgeous vehicles. Yeah.
You can race it. And then, they're getting into things like watches and luggage and all kinds of stuff that people are fans of the car. I bought a lot of stuff in my life, but this isn't well known that I've invested in this company. And by the way, Maz and Rob still run the company. Like they're in charge. We just invested alongside of them. We're fans and investors more than anything. But what we wanted to do was give them enough ability to be able to kind of realize their dreams for the company. And I have never been, I'm trying to think, I've never been involved with a company where people are more passionate about the brand than I have been with Singer. It's people who I barely know are calling me, asking me how to get on the list, asking me what the next products are coming out. I won't ruin it. You should have Rob Dickinson on the show sometime, because he's really interesting to talk to. And I won't ruin what they're going to do, but they have products that are coming out that are just mind-numbingly cool. Like just
you're like an executive at you're like an executive at an automaker now. You get to field all the calls for people who want their cars first.
No, I don't think so. They're just friends that I happen to know. Like it would have been preferable. Like, I'm not that cool a guy, so it would have been preferable for me that no one knows. I invested in this. I own a little pizza restaurant, half a little pizza restaurant, which might be America's best in Brooklyn. And I never tell anybody. Same thing. People want tables, but I never tell anybody that I own it, because it's a very cool place to go, and I'm not that cool. So it's better for the brand for no one to know I own it.
Well, an individual who is cool is your son, Henry. And he is racing.
He is.
What is he racing, and when is he racing?
So he's been racing for a few years now. He races Porsche GT4 Caymans Club Sports, doing really, really well. He's won his first couple poles. Apparently I wasn't there, but apparently this weekend got behind someone who taught him what blocking was. So he was faster, but got blocked out of the and had, I think his coach said he heard a few expletives that he's never heard out of Henry's mouth before at the end of the race. So he got a good
16,
lesson.
right, Greg? He's 16.
15, yeah, he turned 16 in October. Not licensed to drive on the road yet, but licensed to drive on the track. So we've gotten into that. We've been, attending races to watch some people. Our partner in TripAdvisor, who I also know is involved in SiriusXM, also is involved in Formula One, Greg Maffei and John Malone. And they're two of you couldn't pick better partners than those two guys. And they organized kind of a race weekend for us to go to Spa in Belgium. Unfortunately, we didn't see a race.
It was a little wet there that day.
It was canceled. But we got to meet a lot of the people around the racing scene. And it was just a fantastic time for him. And Henry couldn't be more stoked up about cars. And all I'm trying to do is play catch up to what he's doing. But we're hoping we'll go to GT3s next year.
I mean, you put him in front of Lando Norris.
That's true. Lando spent a bunch of time with him after a crash. He crashed in qualifying. And Lando's dad Adam is a great guy. And we were having dinner meeting at McLaren, and we didn't know Lando was going to be there. And he came up after. I thought he was going to be in the hospital, to be perfectly honest with you. And it just goes to show how safe those cars are, because if you see the crash on television, it looks pretty serious. And so maybe not the Verstappen Hamilton crash where but it was, Lando's crash was pretty big deal. And he was there and with bells on that night. And he spent a lot of time with Lando that night and learned a lot of things about what it takes to be successful. And you really see when someone's that good at something, their commitment and dedication matters almost more than anything else. Talent's important. You got to have that, but you don't get to where he is or where any of those guys are without commitment and dedication. And I have a lot of respect for all of them.
A couple final things. Are you a better investor than you are an operator?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. As a matter of fact,
Okay.
I think so. The reason I paused is because all really good operators want to be investors, and all really good investors want to be operators. And listen, I want to be a really good operator. Don't get me wrong, I do. But I'd rather do what I'm good at and leave the operations up to the experts. And for the most part, the best way to think about what I do is nose in, fingers out, right? So I kind of nose around, but I don't touch anything.
We go back to the start of our conversation. How important will it be for a Canadian kid from Waterloo, Ontario, to turn around an American icon like Hertz?
Well, I've actually done that a couple of times. So we did it with American Express, but
it's Hertz.
Yeah, it is. For cars, Hertz is a big deal. For the world, Amex is a big deal, I'd say. So first of all, I think it's an American icon, but moreover, it's a global company. It does business all around the globe. We're going to do better at Hertz. Let me tell you, maybe this is a good way to end it. My philosophy, there's tens of thousands of people that work at Hertz. And if we can make their life just a little bit better, right? There's a union at Hertz that we want to have a productive relationship with there. And that means investment. The best way for a guy who works in a union to tell whether or not the owners of the company have a long-term commitment is, are they making investments in the company, right? And that means they can't move locations, they can't do a bunch of different things that would affect them. So we'd like everybody's quality of life to go up a little bit better, right? And those are the stakeholders of the company. And people listening to this may think I have this exactly backwards. I don't, right? The companies that get emergence from bankruptcy right take care of all their stakeholders. Kind of employees are right at the front of the line, and right beside them at the front of the line are customers, right? And if I can change the customer experience and I have good employees delivering that experience, we'll win. The decisions that everybody spends time on what size of the fleet to have, and do I have this car or that car, or do I have a great relationship with Kia and Hyundai, or do I have a great relationship with Ford and Chrysler? Those things will all come because all those people will want to do business with a company that serves its customer really well and treats its employees really well. And I also think when you treat your employees well and your customers well, you get somehow the universe rewards you karmically, right? And so we'll spend a great deal of time on those things. If we get that right, I'll be proud of it. I'll be proud to be associated with it. Don't get me wrong, but I'll be a lot more proud by going around to all the Hertz holiday parties and celebrations and whatnot, and seeing people happy in their jobs. And I'll be even more proud when I go on TripAdvisor, which I have a big investment in alongside Greg and John, and see positive comment after positive comment after positive comment. And that's really what we're aiming for. If we can do those things well, we know we've got a successful company. The rest will take care of itself.
Greg, we wish you the best of luck. We wish Henry the best of luck on the track. And certainly the best of luck with Rob and Maz in the Singer vehicle development piece of your business.
Thanks.
Yeah. Exciting stuff. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.